we're now going to draw our joints for our back. And we're going to start at our hip area here. And we're going to come all the way up right before the neck. Now, it's important to understand is the back is really has a few regions we need to talk about. We have our hip area down here, which is going to have a joint for it. And then we have our abs, this area here. And then finally, we have our chest going up here. These are areas that need to be rotated and moved. They're really their own systems. So when I rotate my chest back and forth, this whole system needs a move. My abdomen area is actually going to make it up of definitely multiple joints because we want it to be able to twist kind of like a bendy straw. And then we have our hips down here. So to start off with, I really could just have 3 joints here. One in our hip, one in our chest, one in the lower chest, and one at our base of our neck. I actually have to go into one of our side views. And I'm just going to draw in a joint like this. I am going to hold down Shift and drag up. And I'm kind of just guesstimating where this joint should be. And I'm going to hit Enter. So our first thing is that we need to look at where our joints are located. Now, to start off with, I'm going to go into my front view so I can gauge. And I did actually a pretty good job of placing that hip joint down. But you can kind of see how our edge flow is going across like this. That's our hip. And it should make like almost like a little set of underwear like this. So I'm going to translate this down just a bit like that. And my chest could come down a little bit. Actually, that's fine. And then my neck would come up just a tad like that. So here's our 3, this is our main areas. Now I'm going to redraw these because this is obviously not enough for our back, but I wanted to show you how our area. Now, to bend our abdomen area, we're going to need, this character has a really long set of abs. Typically, I could just use one in here, but since his abs are so strong, or so elongated and stretched out, I really think this guy needs at least 2 joints in here to work properly. So we're going to actually add a joint here and here. And our chest would need at least 1 in here. Now, we are going to be making a stretchy back, so having them kind of evened out is going to be important. So I'm going to add 2 joints in the back, and it's actually going to, conclude to be 7 joints in the back. So this is just so we can actually stretch. If this was a game character, I probably would not put joints up here. I would put I'd put 1, 2, 3, 4, and then have like a 5th one up here, and that would be it. But in this case, because we are doing a little more advanced back in this system, I am going to add in a couple more joints in here. So to start off with is that I'm going to delete this. And we're going to draw out a series of joints. So I'm going to go back into my side view. Oops. Like that. And I am going to draw 1 joint like that. And I'm going to hold down Shift and draw a little bit up. And draw another little bit up. And there's our ab area. And then I'm going to put our 2 in our chest. Like that. And then I'm going to come up to our neck and hit Enter. Okay. And they're pretty evened out as we go from there. So we have our 7 joints. And you're probably saying, well, it's not following our back. We're going to move them into our back in a second. The first thing is making sure they're all in the right position. And in this case, maybe I want to I'll move this joint up a little bit. Now, it's completely legal to translate up and down an x-axis. There we go. So I can go my perspective view and make sure that their position's there, and that looks pretty good. Okay, now our back is straight here. And actually, in a lot of systems, I do want my back to be completely straight because it works a lot better for stretchy. But for this character, I'm just not happy with these 3 joints up here. I'm not happy with the neck jutting so far out in front. So I am going to rotate my back a little bit like this, just so it centers itself a little bit better. We will have some consequences for this when we apply our stretchy system, but this would be fine. And if it was a game character and I was not doing a stretchy back, I would literally just go through and just put joints going right down the middle. I would rotate these into position and just kind of scoop and go right down the middle to make it so the binding would be a lot better. But I do want our stretch system to be better on this. So, okay. So now that we're there and we can check our orientation, so we go into our component mode, and then we're going to click on our question mark. Make sure everything is good. You can see how Z's are all facing forward. That's good. If we did this freehand, these joints would be completely messed up right now. Okay, so we have our joints and they're in position, and we're going to name these. Before we name it, we're going to freeze transforms on it because we do have some rotates on them. So say modify and freeze transforms, and we're going to name them. And our naming convention is going to be CT for center, back, O1, and then bind. So, or orientation, the name of the system, the count, and what that object represents. So it's going to be bind or waste in our case. Okay, so I'm going to say CT back O2 bind, CT back O3 bind. Oops, that's not bind. And then finally our last one, CT back 07 waste, because we're not going to use that one. Okay, so now that we have our back, we also want to have our hips. Now, how the hips are going to work is that we're going to have a separate joint just for our hip area down here. So how do we do that? Well, our back already has that perfect position on it. So they're literally going to be two joints right on top of each other. You're going to have our joint for our back system, and then you're going to have your system, you're going to have your joint for your hip below it. So all I'm going to do is duplicate our back joint, our first root back joint. And I'm going to say Command D, and I'm going to delete all the children on here. So I'm just going to go to second joint and hit delete. Okay. Now this joint, we're going to name it hip, and we'll get rid of that one. Okay. You notice that they're actually really hard to determine which joint we're actually focused on. So I am going to increase the radius of our hip joint. I'm just going to click on a radius, and with that attribute selected, I'm just going to middle mouse and make it a little bit bigger. So now it's actually pretty easy to see the two right on top of each other. Okay, and that's pretty much our hip joint. Our last is going to be our neck and our head. Now I'm going to go in our side view, and our neck, we're actually only going to draw one and then two here. Now the neck is normally comprised of at least 3 joints in it, or possibly 4, but we're only going to do, we're not doing a stretchy with the neck, and we're not doing the actual jutting of the neck forward and back. That's something we can add into it, but we can always swap this out and make this more complex later. We're also going to draw another system going from our base of our neck here, and then going to the top of our head. And that is going to be our head system. This is the beginning of our indirect system. We're going to have a series of joints that are working as independent systems, and we're going to connect them together through constraints instead of normal parenting. Okay, so let's go into our side view. And we're going to kind of eyeball this. Now, it doesn't have to be exactly on the end of the back. This is its own system. And I'm going to hold down Shift and draw up like this. We're going to hit enter. Now my first thing is to make sure that our root joint is actually, it looks centered, but I want to make sure it's in the right position in the y-axis. So I'm going to look in my other views and see if it looks good. It looks like it can come down just, actually no, that looks pretty good right there. It does need to come back, so I'm going to rotate it back like this. So it's still in the center, and that looks good. So I'm going to freeze transforms on it. These two joint systems are actually going to be really easy to work with because they're not much to them. I can say center, neck, O1 bind, neck, O2 bind. Oh, sorry, this is waste. It's not bind. There we go. And I can do the same thing with this. I can increase the size of this radius too to make sure that it's easier to see. And then we're going to do our head system. So I'm going back into our side view, and I'm going to say that's going to be right around here. And I'm going to hold down Shift, and I'm going to come up like that. Now I'm doing this last joint so you could see a point of reference when I rotate back and forth. There's nothing we're really going to connect up to this end joint up here. I'm going to check to make sure that we're okay in all our other views, and that should be fine. It's just the neck can be a little deceptive when we're looking at it. So I'm going to freeze our transforms. Actually, I probably don't have to do that on that one. I'm going to say center head 01 bind, and then I'm going to do center head 02 waist, and then we got our elements named. Now throughout our character, this is going to be our most complicated system that we're going to be drawing. But when I look at it, really the back is its own system, our neck is our own system, and then finally our head is our final system. So, and we also have our hips. So we have 4 systems right on top of each other, and these can be swapped out at any time as we go through it. So let's make sure our values are correct. 3 values and translates are fine, no rotates or scales. All the children are only translate X. It's good. Our neck is translate X, Y, and Z. That's fine. The end is only translate X. That's good. Same thing for the head. Now we can check our orientation. So if I select, this is actually really important. These all have to have the same orientation. Now, since I was drawing them all in the same orthographic view, we won't have a problem. So I'm going to shift select we have our back. I know our hip and our back are the same because they're duplicated off each other. I say neck, and I can say head like that. And now I'm going to go into my component mode, and my question mark is already turned on. And you can see how they're all facing Z forward. That's good. I could always, if one of your axes got flipped, I could always rotate it around 180 degrees and freeze transforms on it. But most, if you draw them all in the same orthographic view, you shouldn't have a problem with that. Okay, so orientation is good, our naming convention is good, our values are clean, and our positions are good. So those are all the main base rules for drawing our joints for our back.